All right, hello. Welcome to Reading the Receipts, the weekly recap where we go over the latest happenings of the Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively legal case. So yeah, we got quite a bit to go through. It's been a quiet week, but there is a lot to cover. Mostly because I've spent much of this week compiling everybody's answers to Blake Lively's complaint into a spreadsheet to be able to compare. So that's mostly what we're going to do tonight, is kind of go over what do they admit to, what do they deny, is there anything interesting in that. There's a whole ton of stuff that's interesting about Jed Wallace. Anyway, ooh, we are super loud. Okay, one moment. I did not realize. Let me do. There we go. Is that better? Volume-wise? Because that looked like that was super loud. All right. So we're going to start out with the first thing that happened, I think right before we went live last week, was the New York Times filed their support for their motion to dismiss, completing out the pleading for that. It's not terribly long. It's only 10 pages, so not going to take a long time to go through this. This is basically the legal equivalent of as per my last email, right? And the fact that it is only 10 pages, not great, right? If you're a Wayfarer, because you've put forward your argument, they really don't bother to deal with it, which must mean that they feel confident that the arguments that Wayfarer put forward aren't particularly strong. Howdy, happy Sweet 16 to all celebrates. Yeah, hello everybody. So yeah, we're gonna dig in. Let's see what we got. So there's not really about, like I said, they really just kind of repeat a lot of the same arguments. They don't really kind of add a great deal to it. The only thing is like the argument that Wayfarer said they don't even know where it emanates from. They kind of push back and say, well, you know, again, kind of using Wayfarer's words against them. You know, they alleged in their First Amendment complaint that Lively worked hand in glove with the New York Times, and since both of those are based in New York, that would mean that New York law applies. The only other thing they kind of make a good argument about is that, you know, Wayfarer's argument about defamation is that they go beyond the CRD, that they go to make their own claims, and so therefore it's not protected. The New York Times makes the point that, you know, the only parts of the article that don't really come directly from the CRD are where they kind of support Wayfarer's side of the argument. And they talk about, you know, they show text messages from Baldoni, you know, not being happy about the tactics, that, you know, they were denying using bots, that, you know, after the protections things worked, and that, you know, they added in that Baldoni and Wayfarer are kind of suspected that Lively was planting her own negative press about Baldoni. And so they make the point that, you know, actually the unprivileged material, the material that goes beyond the CRD complaint, is actually supportive of Baldoni and Wayfarer. Hi, Vander V. Good to have you in. So they're kind of making the point that, like, hey, the parts where we do go beyond the CRD are actually like supporting Wayfarer. We're not like defaming them. The other part they kind of point out on page 14, you know, they argue that there's malice here because there's no support for the smear campaign. So if you say that Wayfarer waged a smear campaign, that by itself is malice because, you know, the idea that there was a smear campaign, against Lively is so improbable that that would mean that there's malice on the side of the New York Times to say that, because it's completely baseless. The New York Times says, actually, no, your claim is baseless because, you know, we reproduced all of the text messages, and there's plenty of text messages there that support the idea of the smear campaign. And as we'll see from Wayfarer's answers, they validate almost all of the text messages. So the text messages like, you know, he wants to feel like she can be buried, we can't write that we will destroy her, all of this stuff is stuff that they admit they sent and said. Now, they say it's out of context, but the New York Times is making the argument that a plain reading of those text messages without context, whatever that may be from Wayfarer, would support a smear campaign. So it's not ludicrous to take the evidence that Lively has presented and then assume a smear campaign was directed. The only other thing is they made this argument, and originally they do finally call it out a little more explicitly here. Wayfarer are also arguing that there's this contractual breach by the New York Times, that they promised to publish the article at noon, Wayfarer responded and they published the article early, and this is somehow a breach of a legal contract and understanding that they had between them. The New York Times makes the point that, hey, we never agreed to hold off publication until noon. What you got in the email was, hey, we'll give you until noon for you to respond, right? The idea being that if you respond by noon, we can publish your response as part of the article. They were not promising to hold the article off until noon. So the idea that there was some sort of contractual obligation fails, because that was never promised. Hi, Beaver. Welcome in. And so, yeah, the only other piece is, you know, we do love some snark, right? Some legal snark. And there is a little bit of legal snark at the end. They talk about, you know, Wayfarer kind of asked for being able to amend this. Hey, Obi-Wan Kenobi, glad you're here. You come in at the best part, right? So this is the end of the New York Times support for motion to dismiss, kind of making the response to the argument that Wayfarer should be allowed to amend. They talk to them and say, well, you know, they've had 3 opportunities now to do this. They filed once in California, they filed here, and now their amended complaint. Yeah, it's still defective and has this group pleading issue. They say the federal rules of treatment of amendments is liberal, but not laissez-faire, right? They don't get to continue to do this without intervention. At some point, the court has to step in and say, you're just not doing a good job of this and you need to stop. This is particularly so here because any amendment would be futile. No amendment can change the fact that the article and the video are privileged because they're reporting on the CRD complaint, which is privileged, and that the smear campaign is a statement of opinion. The false light claim fails because it doesn't exist under New York law. And the quasi-contract claims are based on a gross misrepresentation of the email. They were never promising to hold publication until noon. In short, not only did the plaintiffs wait too long to amend, they can do nothing to save their claims. So they're basically saying, like, even if you let them amend, there's nothing they can do to fix, because without having a fix on what the defamatory statement is or claim is, they really don't have a good way to amend the complaint to actually have a valid legal claim against the New York Times. So, yeah. Finally got to join live. Oh, finally got to join it live. Happy to see you being such a strong voice and keep going. Thank you so much for your hard work, mate. Appreciate it, Beaver. And like I said, we're going to keep being here as there's updates every week. This week was a little quieter. I think next week we should start to see some of those responses to the motions dismissed, so it might be a little busier. And I'll also be giving this treatment to the Jones versus Abel lawsuit as well. I just did not get time this week. Okay, so that was the New York Times. The other thing is, I was wrong last week when I said about the news articles that came out about Wayfarer saying that they had not filed a breach of privacy against Jonesworks. That's not true. I only saw Abel's answers that had this counterclaims in it. I didn't see that Wayfarer did, so they did. So we're going to quickly go over those before we go into the answers. There's a little bit in here, but basically what's happening is in the Jones versus Abel case, right, what you've got is Jones is suing Abel, saying that, you know, she was stealing confidential secrets. She breached her employee contract by stealing clients and trying to poach employees from Jonesworks, all of which is counter to her employment contract. I'm not sure if you're familiar. If you have one of these employment contracts, I typically have one in the software engineering world, you will get like non-compete clauses. And it basically means that if you go work for an employer, you agree to not work with a direct competitor for a period of time, 6, 12 months, something like that. You also agree not to then approach any of the employees at your new company, of the old company. You don't try and bleed talent away from that company and try and attract them again. And again, usually there's some sort of cooling off period, 6 to 12 months. And it's just to stop, you know, when you may move and change jobs, you from setting up with either your own competing company or setting up with one of their competitors and using your business advantage to then bleed information, contracts, clients, employees over to another company. Now, Jennifer Abel's is basically making the point that, if we go through here, the beginning here is all their answers to the Jonesworks complaint, which we'll get into next week. I did not get time this week. But at the end of it, they come up with, okay, here's my counterclaims that I'm going after Jonesworks for. The long and the short of it is she maintains that essentially her employee agreement isn't valid, because in California things like non-competes aren't really valid, and so she can't be held to that, because under California law that those provisions in her employee contract wouldn't stand. She also talks a couple of times how she ended up signing a new agreement here in 2021, doing so suggesting like it was under duress, that she didn't do it with legal representation, and so she didn't really fully understand. And then they're making the claims here that, you know, under California law, these provisions wouldn't be stand. I don't know if that stands or works. I don't know. This is where we start to get into like the actual legal law. Oh, and I forgot to start out with our disclaimer. So probably a good point to say, as we're looking at these legal documents, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not your lawyer. None of this is legal advice. And all of the allegations that we're going to cover in these legal documents are just that, they're allegations. Nothing's been proven in court. Nothing we're talking about should be taken as fact, especially not from me. This is all just my opinion provided for entertainment purposes. So please know that anything I've said so far and anything I'm about to say is covered by that. Abel's text proof she stole Jonesworks company documents. Yeah, I mean, she bragged about it. So this is kind of weird that she's kind of arguing that her employee contract should protect her from some of this. Now, in the Blake Lively complaint, when she answered there, she kind of says, to the extent that she's found at any point to have caused any damages against Blake Lively or has to pay any damages against Blake Lively, however that case goes, that should transfer to Jonesworks, because as an employee of Jonesworks, she was acting as, you know, their representative, and so she can't be held liable for it. Wayfarer are essentially making the same argument, that the contract they had with Jonesworks protects them from the damage they were doing. I don't know how valid that is. All right, so what I did think was interesting about this is, you know, they go after Stephanie Jones pretty hard. They, you know, Abel talks about, you know, there was a mass exodus when she joined. People had told her not to join, but she did so anyway. And she said that at no point was there a proper human resources representative. Jonesworks had a toxic workplace culture in which employees lacking an outlet or meaningful recourse constantly gossip and complained amongst themselves and lean on senior employees for solutions to workplace issues. Hilarious, given the other lawsuit that is going on with Wayfarer, where Wayfarer also did not have a proper human resources representative, policies, guidelines, and the toxic workplace where Heath and Baldoni are essentially gossiping and complaining about their employees behind their backs. So I thought that was interesting that Abel in this case is now complaining that Jones has the same setup that Wayfarer had, which is like, okay. She does also go on to say here that she was not responsible for the Business Insider piece and learned of it for the first time from Jones in or around July 2024. We'll get into this when we get into her answers next week, but you know, there's the text messages that Jones has in her original complaint of Abel working on it with Nathan. So it's very weird for her to talk about she's not responsible for the insider piece. I think that word responsible is doing a lot of work. You know, that they're trying to say maybe she didn't start the article, maybe she didn't cause it to be written, but it's very clear that Abel and Nathan were talking about that Business Insider piece and were working with the journalist, providing them information off the record. So yeah, I don't know why she thinks that's going to be a compelling counterclaim to make, because it very easily to show the text messages and say, no, you had some complicity in it. You may not have been fully responsible to it, but there's a large part of it that you are, especially when she talks about taking out Baldoni's letter of recommendation for Jones out. I've not read the Business Insider piece. I probably should, to see whether that letter did end up out. I think it did. Another interesting thing in here is Beaver says they're really just pointing fingers at each other while not being any better. Yeah, I'll get into that in a second, but yes, good point. We'll get into the finger point in a second. One of the other things that I thought was interesting that they pulled out in here is a little later on. They talk about that Jones had this pattern of going after other people, creating fake social media accounts to troll former employees and journalists she deemed hostile, including Puck News's Matt Baldoni. Jones was obsessed with Baldoni, that, you know, she worked with journalists to plant and contribute negative stories about former clients. So, you know, Abel's trying to say she doesn't do that kind of stuff, and that Jones is really the one that does all of this planting of information. But I thought it was interesting that Matt Baldoni gets brought up here, because Matt Baldoni did a podcast with Brian Friedman, and it was sort of seen as like this hard-hitting, and it was basically Baldoni offering softball to Friedman on this podcast. So I thought it was interesting that that connection between Friedman, Wayfarer, Abel, and Baldoni gets brought up here in this case, because I do not believe it was mentioned in Jones's original case, and I don't know if they're just bringing that up to kind of plant seeds and get people to go look at the podcast. Anyway, so, you know, I mean, at this point, we all know the story. She resigns in like July. Everything's kind of amicable. It falls out. They terminate her contract on August 21st, I believe. And then, you know, they take her phone from her and all the rest of it. What a wild case of don't do what I do, just do what I say. Yes. This is the thing. I know nothing about PR. I do know that I want nothing to do with PR, because these all seem like very terrible people. So part of what she's arguing is that she was unlawfully detained, that having been terminated, she was called to the office, and that, you know, there was a security guard, is it here? That was between her and the door, or between her and the exit, not in the conference room with her. Here it is. After being ushered into the conference room, Abel noticed that the security guard was posted outside its doors, positioned between the conference room and the entrance, blocking the exit. She's claiming that that was unlawful restraint or imprisonment. I don't know how you get that. That is just you being terminated and having to hand over your company stuff. They weren't physically restraining her, and they certainly weren't preventing her from leaving. She just didn't attempt to. So anyway, she hands over her phone with her personal cell number. And again, I mean, we've seen this a couple of times now, but she's back to recounting this story because it's been in Baldoni's suit a number of times now. But, you know, she was told that she should be able to get the number, but it was preventing her, here we go, preventing her giving over the physical device without giving unrestrained access to its contents. If she got the number back, and this is one of the things I wanted to know because I didn't know about Apple accounts, is that, you know, if she had been able to transfer the number, would she have like not been able to get certain access to certain things like iCloud? I'm going to turn the light down just a little, one moment. And it looks like that's the case, right? And it seems like what Abel's really upset about is that with not being able to get access to her phone number, Jonesworks got whole control, not only of, you know, the work email and stuff like that, but they also had unrestricted access to other parts of it. And I think that is where Abel really got herself into a lot of trouble. But, you know, she also talked about when she first started, she was given the phone and she transferred her number to the phone, and that this was a company phone that they were paying for. And at that point, as they're paying for it, you lose any right or access to that device. So again, I don't know, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know how you get to make this argument, because the point that the company is paying for that phone is theirs. So every job makes sure you give them their stuff and escort you out when you get fired. You can't just leave. Yeah. They watch if you go with their sensitive, and especially in this case where they already terminated her because they had suspected that she had stolen documents. So, yeah. Anyway, so that's kind of really what she's going for. And then I think, what else was there? So one of the things, and we'll get into this as we go into the arguments in the Blake Lively case, there's bits in here where they kind of reinforce and prove a narrative in the Blake Lively case. So what I'm saying by that is, in Abel's case here, they talk about, you know, Abel's defense is that she was working under the direction of Jones. They point out here that Melissa Nathan and Tag Crisis PR were hired against Jones's wishes, which is something that Jones had made in her complaint and talked about. Wayfarer have already shown that with their timeline as well. But what's in here is that they specifically state, and again, that, you know, after consulting with Jones, who had no viable ideas, they show the text message from Jones. Jones gave us like 2 or 3 ideas. I guess that they didn't see them as, quote, viable. Abel recommended the Wayfarer engage PR crisis expert, gotta love that hat tip, Melissa Nathan, to assist in navigating these choppy waters. Abel had confidence in Nathan as they had worked together extensively in connection with a different Jonesworks client. The need for crisis PR expertise was particularly acute due to Lively's demand for Baldoni not to be permitted to attend the premiere and the threat that Baldoni would be excluded from the press junket with the rest of the cast. So one of the things you can remember is, like, this is everywhere all throughout the scenario planning document. It's throughout his timeline. He argues that the reason they hired the tag PR crisis was because of the premiere and, you know, the argument that he had to do the press junkets at a different hotel. The cast didn't want him doing press junkets with them. None of this, none of the crisis, none of why Melissa Nathan was hired has anything to do with Blake Lively leaking or Leslie Sloan leaking stories to the press. And they keep tripping up and admitting this, that they reached out and hired her at first because they were concerned about the rest of the cast not wanting to have anything to do with Baldoni. It's only when they hire Nathan that Nathan tells them that stories are already being shopped. And we've talked about that before in the part 3, where we talked about, you know, Nathan comes in telling them that there's a story with the Daily Mail and the New York Post that her sister is working on. And she uses that to kind of motivate and put fear into Wayfarer into adopting their plan to go after her. So again, even here, they're pushing a story and admitting that they hired the crisis PR long before they had any fear that Blake was going to do anything. They did it because they feared Baldoni forcing himself to be at the premiere, knowing that the cast was going to boycott, would have some fallout, and how to deal with that fallout if the cast did boycott. All right, and then 87. Atticus says, Stephanie Jones married to WME executive partner of Ride or Die, Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively friend Ari, who's the boss of Joe Rogan. PR equals drama. Yes, I mean, they're all connected, right? I mean, this is the thing is they're all in the same, this is all the same people all together. They all know each other. You know you're dealing with children with the Freudian slip of class bombs. Yes, I mean, there's a lot of this that does feel a lot of like that. All right, so the other part of this is they're back to kind of saying that, well, okay, this whole thing is that, you know, Jones mismanaged this, and that Jones tried to reinsert herself, and that, you know, Wayfarer didn't want her involved. They only wanted Abel. The big problem with this is, like we said, Abel had said that she was resigning in July and that they were going to transition her over to other people managing her account. So at that point, her responsibilities as an employee were just about managing that account out of the door and putting it onto other agents. The whole hiring of Melissa Nathan goes above and beyond her duties as transitioning out the door and handing it over to other agents. This as well, where Wayfarer, before they ever terminate the contract with Jones, are saying, hey, we did not want Jones involved in our account, we only wanted Abel. Again, really doesn't help with their narrative that Abel was only following Jones's directions, because they specifically call out as part of their story, they didn't want Jones's direction, they didn't want her involved. And the whole story with, you know, the Daily Mail news story, that you know, she got involved and pushed that. But again, they again do this whole thing where they try to argue that Jones only got involved after the truce. Now, we've covered this a couple of times, again, pretty much in part 3. But, you know, this is something that really is a little frustrating at this point, that this isn't getting called out, because they're very clear in all of their communications that when you know, Jones gets involved here, where she left word for Lillian Justin, I believe, is the Daily Mail journalist. It was at 8:50 in the morning, but the truce, you have to scroll up because they put it out of order, was at 10:11 PST. So, you know, this whole thing that, you know, she reached out to a Daily Mail and that she was calling and saying, bragging about trading calls with the Daily Mail, came like an hour before the truce, not afterwards. But again, in their complaints, they're twisting it. So it's just something to watch out for. I think, wasn't this also in Wayfarers? I think what we got 39. So Wayfarer are basically arguing that their client confidentiality was breached by Jones sharing these text messages with Blake Lively. If you don't create a crisis, you can avoid hiring crisis PR. Exactly. You can do this by, when your employees say that they're uncomfortable, saying, "Oh, I'm very sorry about that. What can I do to fix that?" No crisis. Then you don't have to worry about it. Crazy how Lively gets singled out when it's the whole set that wanted to stay separated from him. Exactly. And the only reason she's getting targeted is because she's the one that spoke up so far, right? Lively's amended complaint says that although she's not naming the witnesses now, she does have the witnesses on board and they have given her more information, which is why Lively's amended complaint has a bunch more text messages in there that are not presented as text messages, but they're presented as text snippets. And we'll get into that in a little minute. So what did I have on here? Wayfarer number 39. What am I doing here? Oh, yeah. So this again, is them talking about the truce. They did a truce leading up to the premiere, which was not true. We talked about this when we did this whole section with the Daily Mail, right? That was all in the morning at 8 a.m., 9 a.m. It's only afterwards here when Melissa Nathan finds out that Leslie Sloan and Stephanie Jones are talking to the Daily Mail that all hell breaks loose, and then she says, "Oh, I'm going to have to talk to Leslie," and then navigates negotiates a truce. And it's worth pointing out, like, they keep calling this a truce. This is not a truce. Nobody says here, "Please don't do anything. We're both going to agree to something." Melissa just says, "I'm not doing anything without speaking to you," and Sloan says, "Me neither." They're not negotiating any formal truce or anything here. And also at this point, Melissa Nathan is lying because she's stalking. She was just that morning talking to TMZ. She talks in here that, gosh, where is it? I think it was the day before. I think it was August the 7th, actually. My bad. So I think it was the day before she talks about, yeah, here it is, from my friend at TMZ. So, she's saying, "Oh, I'm not doing anything without talking to you." She's going to journalists and with back channels and getting information from them. So there was no point at either side were honoring this quote unquote truce. And it was never really a truce. They were just lying to each other. And the fact that Melissa Nathan didn't know that Stephanie Jones had a back channel to the Daily Mail and that Leslie Sloan had a back channel to the Daily Mail is what messed her up, because she kind of hoped that everybody would just do whatever. I thought I had something else. Number 33. And then 43. What did I have for 43? Yeah, and so the other part of this is this weird where they then blame it on Jones, and they're kind of calling out that, like, Jones wanted to talk to Sony and that, they wanted to shut her down. This is a weird thing to put in your legal complaint, because, again, if you're arguing that Jones was mismanaging stuff and that, Abel needs protection because she's just doing what Jones told her, I mean, at this point, you're telling Jones to stand down, not to talk to anybody. And that in itself is really sus. That Heath and Abel were telling her to stand down and not go clear her name. Like, if you were really concerned about somebody planting a story, you'd want the truth of that to come out, and you'd want all the evidence. Like, let's make sure that it's not Jones. If it's not Jones, who is it? But they seem to be really convinced it was Jones and then just tell her to not talk to anybody. Exactly. Heath and Baldoni were very involved in conspiring against Jones along with Blake and Abel. This is what it seems like, right? I don't know. This is a very weird thing to be calling out, that, like, yes, we were doing everything with our contract, but also we told our PR to stand down. We didn't want her talking to anybody. We didn't want her doing anything. But anyway, very, very strange all around in this. But the worst part about this is they then kind of come on to try to flip the narrative. So we talked about this, about what the issue was Stephanie Jones didn't want any of the negative press and the negative dirty tactics that Melissa Nathan did. Here they try to flip it, and they say, actually, ironically, it was Jones, not Wayfarer, who started advocating for a more aggressive public relations strategy. And they underline here where she says, "We have to fight for every story." But then they bring up her email that she sent, where she said, "Flood the zone with positives," where she's saying, hey, we need to promote positive narratives that they can't ignore. We fight for every inch of story. What she was saying is, we're letting these stories go out unanswered, and that we are just trying to shape them, or we're trying to plant negative stories about Blake, but we're not promoting Justin. Her whole thing here is that she objects to Heath and Wayfarer and Nathan's strategy of going super negative. And they're trying to now like flip this through with this one quote of "we have to fight for every story" as her being aggressive and negative, and like, no, she was aggressively trying to push that we need to push that every story is positive and just build on about Baldoni, which is, you know, now where they've gone with a lot of what they're doing. Jones had a duty to disclose the stolen work product and attempts to steal clients. I don't know. See, this is where I think it gets into gray legal areas, and this is where we probably need actual lawyers to chime in. Is, you know, once Jones finds out and gets the text messages that Wayfarer and Abel have been up to shady business, does she have a duty to report that to Blake Lively? Does she have a duty then to, is she able to share that freely, or is she still under her contract of not sharing confidential client information, even though what they are doing is, at least in this case, against the law and stuff? So we don't know, right? This is where the actual trial will have to come out, and very smart lawyers will get to argue minutiae details of which particular piece of law should apply. This is where they earn the money, right? There really should be more protection for victims when they speak up. Seeing how this abuser often gets the support is tiring. Yeah, I mean, we just did the story this week of you know, the Impractical Jokers and the young women who've come out and spoken about you know, the harassment and grooming that those gentlemen have been doing, Joe Gatto and Murr, of, you know, texting teenagers. And these women have been just basically saying, hey, look at all these text messages I have from these men, and getting nothing but hate. It is a common, unfortunately, story. And there definitely needs to be protections or a mechanism for being able to speak up about this stuff without getting, I mean, like what you're seeing happen to Blake Lively, Colleen Hoover, you know, Jenny Slate, everybody. I mean, like even Brandon Sklenar, where they're like, not only are we going to light up your social media, but every film project you do gets lit up. Truly sickening part is if there's been anybody else but Blake Lively, she would have been able to speak up. Yeah, and I'm sure there are probably nights right now in Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds' household where they're looking at each other going, was this worth it? Was this worth it? I don't know. Anyway, so I think I don't know whether this is going to work, right? In terms of as counter, so we're going to have to obviously see arguments coming back and forth. It seems strange to me, and I'd made this point over on Reddit, that you're trying to say that in both Wayfarer and Abel's case, the contracts you had with Jonesworks still apply and offer you protection, even when you are breaching those contracts. You know, in Wayfarer's case, they were actively, you know, trying to circumvent Jones. They were using Nathan. They were planting negative stories about Jones, or Abel was. How do you then say that you get those protections of those contracts? I don't know. A lot of it, I think, is going to come into what was said when, because I think that then, you know, impacts those things, and when people did find out about that stuff. So we don't know. But Ryan Reynolds' X account is slammed. Ryan Reynolds' everything account is being slammed, right? It is strange to me that they are, and I talked about this, incredibly mad about a 7-year-old, I believe it's 7, I believe their child is 7, saying, you know, profane language in a movie, but they're totally okay with a man consistently making women uncomfortable, lighting up them doing a whole smear campaign and harassing them afterwards. That's totally chill. It's a very strange thing to be upset about, especially when the child actor themselves said that they were objecting to it. They made provisions so that the child did not have to say the line, and then they consented to it. Because if Baldoni had respected consent in the same way that the Reynolds household does, we wouldn't be here. Anyway. So my big problem about this, though, is, I don't know if I brought this up, so I might have to fire up another copy, is when we were going through the motions to dismiss, and in particular, Wayfarer's opposition to Leslie Sloan's motion to dismiss, a big part of what they were arguing about why they needed to amend is because they had a ton of new evidence. Wayfarer parties have already learned substantial additional information since filing its first amended complaint, would allow them to further plead facts in support of their claims. And their argument against Sloan is that basically Jones provided Sloan with information, and Sloan was using that to then plant negative stories about Baldoni. They make it a bunch of times in here. Oh yeah, based on their own investigation, and facts drawn to their attention by concerned citizens from around the country. You mean angry trolls on X? We all know what you mean, and we know which accounts you mean. But like we do, we've seen them. And then 19. Let me see if right here at the bottom. Since filing the first amended complaint, the Wayfarer parties have obtained additional information about Sloan Party's activities during this time, and if granted to leave, those allegations will be in their amended pleading. They do it again on page 21. The Wayfarer parties have gathered additional information sufficient to plead further specific facts to support each of their claims against Sloan. And then I think there's two more. Let me just scooch down. We got 23. Oh, here in the footnote, the Wayfarer parties obtained additional information. And then, all right. To the extent the court determines the Wayfarer parties' factual allegations do not satisfy, the Wayfarer parties are armed with additional facts they will set forth. Cool. Okay, so they have a ton of information new that they're doing stuff. There is nothing in these counterclaims against Jones, right? That was against Sloan. They're saying they have all this information. There's nothing in these counterclaims against Jones from either Abel or Wayfarer that based off new information. It is all the same images, text messages, and everything that they have already shown in both their 179-page complaint and their amended complaint and their timeline. There's no new information here. So again, I think like this is really concerning that they're arguing that, oh, we have all this different information, we need to amend our complaint to be able to put in it. Here you've got these counterclaims, and the counterclaims aren't even based on any additional information. So what exactly are we adding in here? I think that the reason, we come back to that message we talked about, pointing fingers, right? They're just trying to point fingers. I think that they are very, very concerned about the fact that their Blake Lively complaints are going to get dismissed. The New York Times and their allegations against Leslie Sloan. So they needed something new. So they've come up with these counterclaims, which, again, I don't think they're going to stand, but we'll see. And they have done it because they need to be on the attack, because they're very concerned that right now that their Blake Lively lawsuit counterclaim is going to get stripped down. And then that would leave them only playing defense, right? So they filed these to kind of go on the offense. It's not a surprise that all of this was filed on the same day, you know, when they were doing their answers, when they didn't have a motion to dismiss against Blake Lively or against Jonesworks. I think it was basically the only thing left they had to do to kind of show that they're still in this fight, which, you know, is what it is. Let me see, we've got wibbly wobbly morals. Yeah, it's a big ball of wibbly wobbly, morally windy stuff. It's getting so obvious that the smear campaign is targeting Ryan Reynolds now. Yeah, and I think, truthfully, I think it's smart because Ryan Reynolds has more financial interests, and so it's going to do a lot more financial damage. I also believe Ryan Reynolds has the bigger net worth, so it's going to start helping with cutting off the funding for the campaign against them, the lawsuits against them. So I think now we're talking like, okay, if we keep this up, maybe we can bleed them to the point where they don't want to continue the court case. Should be completely illegal, but it is what it is. My straight up speculation is that Jones, this is from Junk Farm, probably is bound by NDAs, but that she's a freaking evil genius. She got a lawyer to seize the phone, the established chain of custody by an officer of the court, and then I think Jones' husband quietly asked Ryan agents to subpoena them. I don't know, right? And so, you know, this is in Blake Lively's claim, and we're going to call it out in a moment, that they got everything through subpoena. Sloan had apparently called Nathan on the same day that the phone was grabbed, on August the 21st. So it seems unlikely that a subpoena was gathered on the same day. We don't know, right? Wayfarer's side are arguing there wasn't a subpoena. Blake Lively's side is arguing there was. Until this goes to court or there's evidence, right? We don't know. We don't know which way it's going to be. Citizen journalist not yet covered by freedom of press. I wonder if he's just giving up the feminist mess now that it's been ripped off and stunned to dust. Don't know, right? That's going to be interesting. I think that's where, like, this is going to get interesting, because he's definitely not going to be welcome in the same spaces, right? You know, people like Liz Plank, Kaylee Krista had also like, worked with Justin. Don't think that's going to happen in future. Who do you get, on your podcast to talk about this stuff? It's going to be interesting what he reinvents himself after this. I think he's just going to carry on with the Wayfarer stuff of like the humanizing stories, exploitation stuff, but we'll see. Do we know if Jonesworks will come to trial before or after Consolidated, Lively, New York Times, and Baldoni? We don't. I don't think. I don't know if there is a trial date on the Jones stuff. And I think it'll probably all end up happening at the same time. With them doing the counterclaims, it might even all get rolled up. I don't know. The spreadsheet is a thing of beauty. Yeah, it took some time to do. So let's go through it. So what we're going to do is, get your kind of seasickness medications, because we're going to be doing a lot of flipping back and forth and tabbing through this because I have a little bit of real estate on the screen. But what I want to do is kind of go through this and go with it through with their answers to it. If Sloan saw any messages, they could have just easily been the one about Jones and not Lively. Could be. If Ryan Reynolds, if he wins the motion to dismiss, takes his 300 million off the table, if he gets the sanctions, legal costs, and court costs, he should take a huge bite out of the Sarowitz war chest. If, right? Yes, Atticus, if, right? We don't know where we're going to be. I don't know that that'll happen. I think what we're going to see is some pieces get amended, get dismissed, and then Wayfarer are given leave to amend their complaint to kind of create something consistent out of the spaghetti mess that's going to be left from all of the holes and things that get stricken out of it. But we'll see. I don't know. Not a lawyer, so I could be completely wrong. It's going to be interesting. That does happen sometimes. All right, so there isn't really anything like interesting from the beginning. I've got the claims here, and then we go through. One of the things is on number 8, they talk here about Lively was not the only one who was uncomfortable on set, and that Wayfarer and Baldoni knew it. They argued that Lively is the kind of person who believes she's just. Now, their answers are kind of stark. A lot of their answers, they don't really break stuff apart. There are a few places where they'll say, we admit to this, but not to this. Or, this piece is correct, but everything else is wrong. Or everything's wrong apart from this piece. Most of the time, though, they just basically either say, we don't know. We don't agree, like we deny. There are a handful of admit, but those admits are just basically factual things like, Baldoni is a co-founder of Wayfarer. Cool, yeah, we admit that. The most of the time you'll see a lot of this purple here, admit partial. What that means is this is where they admit some piece of it but deny everything else. Typically it's that this news story was published by the Daily Mail and it said these things. They'll say, sure, we agree that article was published. We disagree about the context in which you're using that article or what it says, and then we deny any allegations outside of and around that. There's another one here, this kind of light blue one for admitting text. This again is a common one where they say, we admit that a communication was sent between Baldoni and Abel, or Abel and Nathan, or whoever. We admit that communication was sent. We admit that it contained the text that you have shown. And then we deny all of the allegations. We deny that the context you're using it is accurate or correctly represents what the intended message was. So that is kind of like, you'll see a lot of this blue here. That is pretty much predominantly what they say when it comes to the text messages. Now, it's important to note, virtually all of the text messages are admitted to. Not all of them. There are some they specifically deny, or they deny the whole thing without really addressing whether the text message is true. He's going to end up being an anchor for Newsmax or Fox. I don't know. I don't know if he's going to go full red pill right wing. I don't think so. I don't know. I would give him more credit than that, but I don't know. We'll see. So that's most of it, right? Most of it is denials. Most of it is admitting the text. There are pieces here where you go through the spreadsheet. You'll notice here, they don't all have the same answer. This is perfectly fine and understandable. You'll notice, for instance, like Steve Sarowitz has a lot of don't knows, right? Look at this section here. Doesn't know. Totally understandable. He wasn't there. He wasn't privy to those text messages. So of course, he can't give an answer and admit them. So it's not, don't read anything too much into where, you know, like this one, everybody denies it, but Steve Sarowitz, because Sarowitz doesn't know. That's not really anything big deal. There are some places where their answers don't line up that are a bigger deal. And we're going to cover some of those. But yeah, so first off, number 8, they outright deny, right? So they're coming out and saying, nope, there were not multiple people, but it could also be, and this is the problem with their like blanket denials. It's not just that they say this, that she wasn't uncomfortable. There's this whole paragraph. They could be denying other pieces of this and they just blanket deny because of it. So it's hard to know. Okay. All right, so let's go to 11. This is going to take us a little while. So this is talking about live lead reporting concerns to Baldoni, Heath, the chief executive Wayfarer, and to Angie Giannetti, right? This is in his timeline. He doesn't know when Lively said it to Giannetti, but they do say that they were called on the 29th with Lively's grievances. However, every single person on the board says nope. They basically say we deny that we were engaged in welcome behavior, and then they deny everything else. So they're saying we didn't engage in unwelcome behavior. We were not told about it. And you know, you didn't speak to everybody about unwelcome behavior. They do this basically throughout their whole answers. They categorically deny that any of the behaviors that were complained about, that they were continuously warned about, that they admit in their timeline that there was 4 meetings about, that they offered repeated apologies for, were, quote, unwelcome or inappropriate behaviors. So I don't know, like what the hell they think those behaviors were that you have to apologize 3 times. I guess, you know, women be emotional. But yeah, it's strange because like they're categorically taking like, and again, this is probably just legal defense, the absolute strongest defensive position possible, that they're even denying that the behaviors were even unwanted or unwelcome, despite the fact that they admit there were multiple complaints for them. All right, so carrying on, number 12. Over the following 3 days of March, another female cast member reported to Miss Giannetti, and that, you know, Giannetti shared those connections with Wayfarer. Despite the fact that Wayfarer admit that Giannetti called them on 29th and talked to them about it, they continue to deny that there was a second cast member who complained. Now, this gets really weird because on number 13, they say that Baldoni responded to that female cast member in writing, acknowledging that he was aware of her concerns and that adjustments would be made. You can see it. Most people don't know, but Baldoni himself, who sent the message, in his text message admits that Baldoni sent a text message acknowledging certain concerns by an actress on the film, stating that they would be addressed appropriately. So this is where we start to get wild. They're saying there were not multiple cast members who made complaints. They were not relayed to them by Angie Giannetti, but also, yes, I did send a text message apologizing for my behavior. Again, I get this is going to be legal strategy, right? Like this is when it comes to the trial, they're going to try and argue that, well, you know, I get that, you know, maybe I don't know what it was or what it was regarding, but I felt like I should apologize anyway, just to be a nice person, but I'm not admitting guilt or blame or responsibility for any of the behaviors. This is basically what you see throughout the answers, which is wild for somebody who has platformed himself as being this feminist ally of listening to women, yada, 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 right? All right, number 14. Wayfarer took no actions to investigate this conduct. You know, talking about Lively said that she found it really hard to speak to him and try to cover it with business, but that show that goes on, blah, blah, blah. All of this was occurred in undocumented writing a year before the editing of the film. Everybody says they don't know any part of this apart from Mr. Baldoni, who categorically denies that Wayfarer failed to investigate the reported conduct or implement any protections. So in that is an admission that there was complaints or there was something, right? Because if you're going to deny it, you're going to say, deny all the allegations. We deny that there was any inappropriate conduct, as you've said up here further involved. They have no problem writing that. Here, he's specifically denying that Wayfarer failed to investigate a reported conduct or implement any protections. So 2 pieces to that. 1, they're denying that there was reported conduct that they failed to investigate, or they're denying that any conduct was reported that they failed to investigate. Does that make sense? So there's two pieces the way that they're going with this. Again, taking the broadest possible defense here, they're saying we didn't fail to investigate reported conduct. And that could mean we didn't fail to investigate. It could also mean there was no reported conduct. Which is wild after you just said that you admitted a text that you did. He really went not like other guys until he was, and seeing how quickly he became the opposite of what he was advocating for is just pathetic. I think I'm trying to work on a video to talk about it, because I think this is something that really bugs me. It's why I've been so passionate about this, because obviously being in this field, I guess, I don't know what, this content, this avenue, this niche, it's a pain, because unfortunately it's something that is seen a lot with men in this field, by doing it for the wrong reasons. Just like signing the no more list, he doesn't actually admit any of the things. Yep, we'll get into that. He does that. Oh, also, Marcy Jinx, hi. Forgot to say hi. We didn't know, but if you did, yeah, we didn't know, but if we did, we investigated. Exactly. So they're saying we didn't know there was any bad conduct, but if we did know there was bad conduct, we would have investigated. All right, so carrying on. So 16, again, there's this denial of investigation. So before returning to them, you know, that we wrote the implemented list, the returns for protection to contract, having the all hands meeting, and that Todd Black would be brought on. And they call out here specifically Wayfarer's complete failure to investigate is what caused those protections to come out in the first place. Baldoni's again is a little different. He does say that yes, we did enter into a contract with for return to production. Probably zoom in. Defendant denies that Lively made any formal complaints. See, this is where we're going. No complaints were made. That Wayfarer failed to investigate or address such complaints, and that the returns protection were designed to require Wayfarer to cease any onset behavior of Baldoni or Heath or remedy any misconduct. Defendant does all of the remaining allegations. Again, this is really difficult to argue when, you know, coming back to Blake Lively's legal letter. So this is the letter that comes from her lawyer, or her legal representation at this time, to the film's lawyers. So when I say the film's lawyers, right, there is an LLC created, or is it an LLC? I forget. There is it ends with this movie LLC. There's an LLC that's created for the movie. And there was lawyers that were hired for it. So in Blake Lively's letter from her lawyer to the film's lawyers, right? It's no surprise to the film's producers that the experience of shooting the film has been deeply concerning on many levels. The complaints of our client and others have been repeatedly conveyed and well documented throughout pre-production and photography. So again, that whole formal complaint is doing a lot of lifting. There was no formal process that Wayfarer had, so there couldn't be any formal complaints because they didn't have a process. So it's very easy for them to turn around and say, well, we didn't have any formal complaints. This right here from the lawyer, I think pretty much serves as a formal complaint. While we reserve all legal rights at this stage, oh no, we disconnected. Oh, we connected. Uh-oh. We'll give it a second. All right, chat, I'm gonna need a thumbs up to make sure that you're still connected. Did we still get everything good? Thumbs up from chat that worked and reconnected itself. Let's see what's going on. Back, thumbs up. Okay, we're good. So yeah, so it's very difficult from the letters from the lawyers here calling out that there were prior complaints. I mean, the lawyers here knew exactly what they were doing, right? In calling this out to make sure that there was a paper trail, and they don't get to do this. And yet they're still trying to say that there wasn't any. Again, 17, importantly, none of the requested protections were tied in any way to creative input, so they're pushing back on this idea that Lively was trying to take control. Everything she requested was designed to ensure safety and well-being of the cast and crew. You know, making the point that when she had maximum leverage prior to resuming production, she did not use that leverage to obtain anything other than protections for herself and others to ensure a safe work environment. Everybody just kind of says this is a legal conclusion and doesn't really need any response from us, but in wherever it does, we deny it. Baldoni's is different because again, he just straight up and says no, denies everything. All right, 29. So keep moving. What was it? I wanted to send this one. Oh yeah. So number 20. So we come back to the January 4th meeting. Lively says that she outlined the behaviors that would need to cease. They deny it. They talk about the marketing plan that was created and delivered by the film's distributor Sony and is attached as Exhibit C. They come back and say, where are we? Wrong one. 23? 23. They admit that he sent the communication. They deny everything else. What was the communication? That Heath had basically said to Sony that the marketing plan was brilliant and fantastic, and that it has not been inappropriately marketed in any way. So Lively's trying to use this to say that they were aware of Sony's marketing plan and they were on board of it. Again, 26. So this is where she talks about quoting their plan to say what the public didn't know was this was the beginning of a plan that Baldoni and his team described as social manipulation designed to destroy Lively's reputation. Plan was backed by Steve Sarowitz, where he said that he was going to spend $100 million to ruin her family. Everybody else kind of admits that, you know, bits of that are true, that, you know, Sarowitz is co-founder and co-chairman. Everything else, the wording and all the rest of the language, they deny. Baldoni just straight up denies, again, all of it, going a little harder than everybody else. Again, nothing particularly damaging about that, but it's just interesting to point out. Okay, 29. On July the 31st, Abel, Wayfarer, and Baldoni retained Tag PR. And they talk about, hey, we want to start threads of theories to discuss to be fully 100% protected. They want creation of social fan engagement to go back and forth, right, with negative accounts, helping to change the narrative and go track. So I think, as most of us are aware of, any positive content playing Blake Lively, there is a ton of people who suddenly show up to go back and forth and argue with you and, quote, change the narrative and stay back on track. And there's all of this stuff. You know, again, they argue that, yeah, sure, we retained and listened Nathan. Nathan delivered a proposal containing the text set forth in that paragraph, but we just deny that the proposal and its context are characterized accurately. I'm not sure what the correct context for creation of social fan engagement to go back and forth with negative accounts would be, if not for the exact stuff that we've just talked about, or what social manipulation would be that would be not in the way that we're talking about. Yeah, and flaw, yeah. But again, this is part of the problem they have, is they admit to virtually all of the text. And this is the thing. For weeks, when Lively's complaint dropped, they bragged about how they knew that it was all manipulated and that it was all doctored screenshots and all the rest of the stuff. And it's here on 29 here where Lively actually calls out that they obtained the communications through a legal process, including a civil subpoena served on Jonesworks. In the statements to the media and public filings of this court, certain of the defendants and their counsel have baselessly claimed that Lively or her counsel engaged in criminal alteration of these materials. That is false. Jonesworks produced the communications to Lively in connection with a lawful subpoena, and the documents included within this complaint are attached in the format in which they were produced, subject to the subpoena, with limited redactions of names and phone numbers to protect third parties' privacy. At all times, Lively has understood that the produced documents and communications to have been lawfully obtained, maintained, and produced by Jonesworks. So they're pushing back on this idea that anything here has been manipulated. And again, none of this, from what they come back and say, did they say that anything has been manipulated. There's only a couple of places, and we're going to talk about those as we go through this, where they deny a text. And I think they're not necessarily denying the text. They're just wanting to put the broadest possible, like, we deny everything here. Because it's always around whenever there's a HR complaint mentioned. Okay, the big piece, though, is page 31, where they talk about the scenario planning document that she, you know, that they gave, that Nathan gave them in case Lively and her team make her grievances public and to get ahead of the narrative, right? Nope, not this one. It's in Lively's complaint. I'm sure you probably everybody on here has probably gone through this thing multiple times, right? But again, they admit the text of the scenario planning document. So this is confirmation that the scenario planning document that Baldoni admits in his timeline, August 2, gotta come back. August. Scrolling. All right. I think it's probably just faster right page up. August 9th, August 2nd, right, is when they talk to Nathan and they get the proposal from her for this here, the scenario planning document. So this is confirmation that the one in Lively's is that confirmation document. They admit the text of it. They admit that this is what Nathan proposed to them. You can see here, not everybody has all full information and admits to it. Nathan and Abel pretty much say, yeah, this is the text that we provided and we discussed. So we have confirmation that this is in here. And this, again, I think this is difficult, right? Because this is where they come in and say, oh, this is the marketing plan. Wrong one. This is where they come in and say, you know, look, we're protecting the reputation of them, of Baldoni, Heath, and Wayfarer. We're doing it because Blake Lively and her team are going to make her grievances public. Again, hard to say that you don't have knowledge of the complaints if you already know what you're defending against here. And given that she was made to compromise with the premier. So they're doing so not because there's stories being planted, that they are already under attack, that they fear these stories are being leaked and that they're coming after them. They're doing it because specifically their concern was, and we talked about this in parts 1 and parts 3, the cast were boycotting the premiere. Wayfarer was sending Baldoni anyway, and they were still trying to negotiate a plan that the cast would be comfortable with. So they were worried that the cast wouldn't be there, and so then there would be this huge fallout, this PR crisis that they would have to deal with. All right, what's chat say? I think something happened with the child actors after that Blake got the dailies. Yeah, I think so. And they're not child actors. I should point out they are playing the younger versions of the characters that are minors, I believe, but the actors themselves are not. After that, things really changed. Yeah, I think so, Sylvain. I think something happened in the dailies that that really concerned her. And Jennifer says that he admits she complained to his face, read the heart comment. He's not allowed to be blindsided by her questions. Point later, he was obligated to invest in act when she told him to stop on set. Agreed. As their employer, like, I don't know. Callback from the last stream. Tag admits Jed was retained and worked with Nathan. Oh, we're gonna get into the whole Jed stuff. We're a little bit there, but yes. The Jed stuff is very weird because they both admit to Jed and deny Jed. Once we get into like the 100 and 200s, once we get into the 200s, you'll see it gets very strange. All right, so yeah, so 32. This is where Baldoni says, you know, I'm not sure I feel the protection that I get. He says the most important thing is how they can shut it down. Again, they admit to the text of this. They don't deny that, yes, they felt like the plan didn't go far enough. Even though, you know, this is the plan where they're talking about, hey, you know, talk about how she took over the movie, talk about how, you know, Ryan Reynolds weaponized feminism, talk about Taylor Swift, all this stuff, right? I mean, this is the map they had for going after them. This is also the document that Melissa Nathan said did not include everything that they wanted. Because if they did, it would get bad. It would look bad for them, so they couldn't put everything in here. So this is just the friendly version. So goodness knows what they actually talked about on the phone that is not in here. All right. So yes. So even like, you know, the text, these texts, you know, this is what we're talking about. Of course, you know, send over documents. We can't send over the work we could or would or could do because that would get us into a lot of trouble. We can't write. We will destroy her. We will do this. You know, he wants to feel like she can be buried. Was this one 33? All of it 33. You know, Baldoni tries to play, you know, I don't know anything about this because I wasn't involved in this conversation. But Nathan and Abel admit that, yes, they sent these text messages. They're accurate. They just deny the context and that they're portrayed accurately. We have seen from Baldoni what the actual context is. You know, he's included all of the rest of the messages. None of these messages change the context. I think this is the thing that gets me about all of this. Like, you don't have the context right argument. At this stage, they have filed over 600 pages of legal complaint. They have filed their 200 plus page, what is it, 220? Oh, sorry, 168 page timeline with additional evidence and text messages. There is not a single text message that they have shown, like the context of it, that has changed it. They are still stuck at, we showed an emoji. And that means that everything afterwards is sarcastic. And it doesn't. It's like that emoji doesn't just mean sarcastic. So it's strange to me that they are continuing to hold on this, everything's out of context. Why is it then in 600 pages of filings have you not shown what the context is? You've had multiple opportunities to amend your complaint, to file additional information, and show us the context. Like, show us where this is being misrepresented in tone. And apart from that single emoji, they've not shown us anything. It's so infuriating that people are still regurgitating the talking points from that document while denying that Team Baldoni did anything. Yeah, I mean, like, this is why we did this series. This is why we're doing these weekly chats, right? Is to go through the documents. Nobody can say now, you haven't read the documents. You're not going through the documents. You're not looking through them. You look at the documents and, you know, he says the context is different. Cool. Show us what the real context is. You had 600 pages. You get your timeline. Show us the context. They haven't been able to. Feminist Baldoni is fine with harassing and sending waves of fan after other feminist channels for the sake of the ego, some ally. I mean, this is the thing that gets me. Brendan Sklenar had time to issue a public statement back in August saying, hey, please don't harass my co-stars. He's not been able to, can't muster it. But he can call back Grid so that he can get lots of pictures of him and his family. It's frustrating. It is. I don't know how anybody can be looking at what is going on and be comfortable with not speaking up about it, especially not somebody who claims to be an ally. All right, so Miss Nathan, follow this. We can bury anyone. Him saying, hey, this is what we need about Hailey Bieber. Again, admit. Just that the context is wrong. This whole piece where they spoken to Melissa about what we discussed for social and digital, focus on Reddit, TikTok, Instagram, the social media campaign. Again, yep. You know, they talk about, yep, admit the text. The context is just not there. We're at 36. Okay, 43. So, you know, this is where they're starting to really worry about the campaign. So 43 is where they talk about, hey, this went so well. We have the 4 majors standing down on the HR complaint. They again admit the text for this one as well. There's so much evidence in their text. What gets me is so much of the evidence that we have about their text comes from their own timeline. If they had not posted this would be much harder, right? I mean, if you look at, especially the first 5 episodes that I did of this, there's so much that I pull from what we know from their text messages. They did not need to show us and reveal this. And in terms of legal strategy, it's dumb. It's dumb that they did that. Anyway, because it really shows how much of what they're claiming just doesn't work. They come back down here and say, hey, they admitted that that Lively had raised issues with Baldoni and Wayfarer multiple times. I think, you know, what's it, the June 1st meeting, right? That Baldoni says, hey, I apologize like 3 times. Says, whereas despite this, Baldoni apologized for a 3rd time. So yeah, I mean, she brought it up multiple times. They admit that they were able to bury anyone, and they were celebrating how successful they were at confusing people. They started to see a shift on social largely due to Jed's team and his efforts. This one they all punt on and say, well, that's just a legal conclusion. We don't need to add a response. But to the extent that we do, we deny everything. All right, 53. But they are, you know, talking about shutting down the stories. 53. This one's kind of uncomfortable. This is where, in her amended complaint, Lively includes the text message from Jones's complaint about Abel saying, you know, she doesn't like Justin Baldoni. He's unlikable and unrealistic as a leading man, but I can't stand him. He's so pompous. He doesn't need a retreat. He needs to be humbled. You know, Baldoni and everyone else claims they don't know anything about that. that exchange because they're not involved in it. But Melissa, Nathan, and Jennifer Abel are more than happy to point out that yes, those text messages are accurate. We did send those. They're just out of context. I'm not sure what the context of, you know, he's unlikable and unrealistic as a leading man is. Maybe she was talking about somebody else. Maybe she was talking about Brendan Sklenar. I don't know. Notice how there's no emojis in there, so prior expeditions. Okay, Junk Farm, well played. Well played. There's so much. Yeah, I think we've read everything. The moment I had this is a talking part from supporters, all I had was Baldoni's wounded ego. Oof. Out of context, he wasn't supposed to see them. Yeah, I mean, that's rough. 58, what was 58? Oh, this one's not really a big deal, but it's just interesting. In here, she talks that Lively's team had called him a producer for the film. For this one, everyone admits kind of partial to say, yes, it's true, but he's not a producer. I'll show you Baldoni's. It says, defendant denies that Baldoni served as a producer. As to all remaining allegations, defendant admits such allegations. Everybody except Abel, for some reason. Abel just says, yeah, that's true. I don't know why, that just amused me, but it's a point that is definitely probably something that is a mistake here. Baldoni is not credited as a producer. I don't think he's credited as an executive producer or anything, so it was wrong for them to put this in here. I don't know why. Maybe they copied and pasted. But good call out that is definitely something that is wrong in here. Gordon, but yes, no, it was Gordon Baldoni. Good call out there, Atticus. Good reference. And if you don't know what that's referring to, then you need to watch Deadpool and Wolverine. All right, so 62. This is where we start to get into hiring Melissa Nathan. So they say here that defendant Melissa Nathan is an individual who provides crisis management. They start to like describe who the defendants are. What's interesting is Baldoni says he has no idea. You'll notice here that Baldoni, Heath, Wayfarer, and the ends with us all say, yeah, we have no clue. I'm just going to show you his answer just so we can see. Actually, I could bring it up in here so you can see it a little bigger. 62. This is where things start to get a little weird. Defendant lacks knowledge or sufficient to form a belief about the truth of such allegations. Of whether Melissa Nathan is launched TAG or was part of TAG. Interestingly, though, Steve Sarowitz, in his answers, is more than happy to say, well, sure, Nathan is an individual who provides crisis management, but as to everything else, I don't know, right? So I don't know that she necessarily launched TAG on this date. I don't know necessarily that she lives in North Hollywood or that she lived in Brooklyn, right? Like, he's basically saying, I admit to this piece, but I don't know this. Baldoni says, I don't know any of this. I don't know anything. Melissa Nathan, never heard of her. So Nathan and Abel, however, admit all of the next pieces. That the agency group is a company that provides messaging and media relations and crisis messaging, that Jennifer Abel, CEO and founder of RWA, and that she lives in Beverly Hills. So they admit to all of this, that yes, all of this is true. But again, you can see here, Baldoni doesn't know. He doesn't even know his own publicist. Who? Abel? Never met her. Like, it's the strangest thing. This is 64. Here's his answer for 64. Lacks knowledge of your own publicist? What is going on here? But where we start to get really strange is the next piece. We have information about Mr. Jed Wallace and defendant street relations. You will notice that all 8 defendants have no idea who this guy is. Never heard of him. Jed Wallace? Don't know anything. Don't know anything about those allegations. Nothing. So it's very strange. So, you know, you can see here from 57 to 66, or 67, this is where we're describing who the defendants are, and they admit, you know, yes, these are the defendants. For some reason, Baldoni, Heath, Wayfarer, and it ends with us have no idea who Melissa Nathan, Tag, and Jennifer Abel are, and nobody knows Jed Wallace or street relations. Very strange. Very strange. Where that gets really strange, of course, is did I do this wrong? 126. Baldoni's own timeline says crisis mitigation specialist Jed Wallace is engaged to assess and monitor all online and offline concerns to Baldoni and Wayfarer. Wait, you don't know who he is. So why is he in your timeline? Why do you know that he's a crisis mitigation specialist? And yet when Lively says that, you know, he's a self-employed PR consultant who offers crisis mitigation services, you say you don't know. Well, no, this is the weird thing. Cillian says, I think he's pretending not to know because of the bury her comments. They admit to the bury her comments. So the text messages where they're saying, hey, we want to bury her. They say, yes, we did those. We sent those. We just deny they're in the right context. What we meant by bury her was bury her in praise. But all of a sudden, they have no idea who Jed Wallace is. 73, the contract. Nailed it. See, this is why I could be a liar. What we meant was we were going to bury her in praise. So interestingly, again, part of their argument against the New York Times, right, that they're having is that this counterclaim that they had a contract with the New York Times not to publish until noon. And so she calls this out in here and saying defendants have alleged they have a contract with the New York Times. Everybody says, where are we, 73? 73. Everyone says yes, admits it. Is it 73? It is. For some reason, Sarowitz differs slightly and denies that he had a contract with the New York Times. I don't know why. It's just a very strange one. He says, defendant is alleged he had a contract with the Times. Oh no, I was wrong. He did say that he did. Okay. I guess I was wrong. My bad. I don't know why that's in there then. See, I can make mistakes. There are probably mistakes in this spreadsheet as well because I copied and pasted. So if you find any, please do let me know. I forgot to put the URL for this in the description. I'll make sure I do it before we do it for the replay. So if you're watching this on the replay, the link should be in the description unless I've procrastinated and ADHD has got a hold of me and I'm doing 80 million other things instead. All right. 84. So the other thing, we can scroll through, getting to where we're talking about the intimacy coordinator, and particularly in 84, Lively talks about how she complained about his inappropriate behavior as early as May. That it occurred without an intimacy coordinator present, which is why she asked for one. Miss Lively did not refuse to meet with the film's intimacy coordinator. She said she did not meet with one before production started, which I'm sure is familiar to a lot of you, because there were no immediate scenes in the immediate future, so they could talk once production began. Lively did have a call with the intimacy coordinator during preparation. So if anybody is still telling you that she didn't meet with the intimacy coordinator, you can call out that no, she did actually have a call during the preparations for production before the film started filming. Those conversations happening close in time to the filming of the relevant scenes. Elsewhere, Baldoni has blamed the intimacy coordinator for supposedly writing graphic new scenes, including all of that stuff that we're not going to speak out because of YouTube. But Lively consented to those scenes in the script as written at the time she signed on. Baldoni did not have consent to rewrite and add sex scenes, even if he did so with an intimacy coordinator. Again, this is one that they just blanket deny. Ooh. Come on. He denies these allegations, which is interesting given, again, in his own timeline. Intimacy rewrite. Oh, I guess I didn't put that in here. Oh, I'm gonna go look for intimacy coordinator. I think it's here. Right, so this is him rewriting those scenes and adding those in. So we do know that after she signed onto the film and signed onto the script, he was changing scenes. He was rewriting scenes and he was doing it without anybody else's input but the intimacy coordinator. So he's blanket denying it there, but like his own timeline admits that yes, he was doing that. Bravo for the spreadsheet. Yeah, this is so nice. nobody knows who is doing what, but everybody's doing something they're getting paid to do, but nobody says what. But it's, yeah, it's this is the feeling through all of this. They're paying Jed Wallace 15 grand a month, but we don't know what he's doing. I feel like a lot of this could have been avoided for Baldoni if he just followed the request of the cast and stayed quiet, but he had to speak out. How mean Lively is and ruined the movie. Yeah, I agreed, Viva. I think, like none of this would have come out without the smear campaign, right? If they had just either not sent Baldoni to the premiere or let the negotiation that they had to come up with this two premiere approach where Baldoni went on the red carpet first and then left when the rest of the cast come, which again, Wayfarer were the ones that set that up, and then they had separate screenings. If they just let that lie, we would have been fine. It was the smear campaign that came after it, and again, really, it was Abel messing with Jones and getting terminated, because if Jones, if Abel hadn't been terminated, would she have been able to clean up her phone or get her phone number back and not have the text messages come out? I don't know, right? Like there's all of this could have so easily been avoided. All of it. It's so crazy to me. Stringer Bell, the lack of an intimacy coordinator on set. Yeah, I've got to do another short video about this because we talked about it, I think in part 5, where they admit that basically they filmed an intimate scene with Lively, the bathroom scene, and there was no intimacy coordinator. Yet they said there was always an intimacy coordinator when they were filming intimate scenes, and that was not true. They admit to it in their own timeline. I wonder if Caspian says, I wonder if any of the lawyers will find these streams in Discovery or something ends up asking to that gorgeous spreadsheet. Caspian, I will tell you this right now. I am very positive that that a lot of this information does get back to them. I don't know that. Let me just make it very clear. Nobody has directly contacted me, and if anybody does, that would probably be something I would talk about and make very clear. To be completely transparent, but I think it's very obvious from certain things that have happened and been said from public statements that the legal teams on both sides are indeed watching creators, watching social media, looking at some of this stuff, and I don't necessarily know that we're coming up with it or suggest like they're like relying on us to do this stuff, but I do think some of it influences, if that makes sense. Yeah, there's just been a couple of things in press statements that kind of like they're hat tips. They're hat tips to the creators, and I'm appreciative of it. I'm appreciative that they're kind of nodding to the creators and supporting them without directly addressing them, because I think the moment that there is a direct contact, like say for instance, if anybody on Lively's team or her lawyers were to talk to me, then all of my content becomes tainted. You can't trust me as a source. I'm just doing this as a shill of the rest of the stuff. I think it hurts the platforms, because then, let's say I advocate like on the Impractical Joker stuff. Do you know that I'm being impartial there, or has somebody reached out to contact me? So I think it's just, I don't want them to contact directly, but I think there's definitely, rest assured that information, I think, flows. I think somebody has the task of watching TikTok. Good job. And they're being paid legal hours to do it. I want that job. Do you want to be contacted by Lively's polystaters? No. See, that's what I'm saying. Like, no, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Unless, as I've talked about, it's that, they want to deliver Blake Lively's amazing cupcakes as payment. I will happily accept that. That works. All right, moving on. 89. 89 is the birth scene, right? And so in Lively's complaint, she talks about, the chaos of the set, but she also talks about the non-essential person present that day was Sarowitz, who flew in for one of his set visits. Everybody denies it. Sarowitz in particular denies and says defendant denies he was present during the filming of the birth scene. So that's not what's alleged in here. At no point does it say he was there for the birth scene, but as we talked about when we covered the nudity rider, I think, what was that, day 2, part 2, that was supposed to be a closed set for the day with lockdown on visitors, and there's an argument that he was a non-essential personnel Though I should point out, like I said, somebody on Reddit who is in the industry who wants to be anonymous pointed out to me that as an executive producer, he might not be counted as non-essential and probably still be allowed to visit even on a locked down closed set. They are watching. Yeah, string build, absolutely. It's very obvious that they're paying attention because this part of this case involves a smear campaign. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much of creators are going to get dragged in, but that's another reason not to have any direct connection with anybody, is because the moment that you do, right, you know, you could be subpoenaed and dragged into this, and all of your information and everything gets dragged into this and be part of that. And if nobody contacts you, then, you know, you don't have to worry. A subpoena comes to you and you can say, yeah, sure, you can have all of my communications. Here's nothing. So you protect yourself as well by doing it. Though I can understand that some people would want the recognition, I guess. Like, I think that's where that comes from, right? You want to be part of something. Okay. So when it comes to playing the video, and all the rest of the stuff, they deny, even though they admit to playing the video to her, they just deny wholesale the whole thing. They don't admit to showing her the video, but only do bits of it. When we come in here, they just deny the whole thing. Deny, same with adding the additional scene and saying that it was hot when filming the younger versions of the characters, but also denies the story about the car ride, right? And this is, I think, one that people have been really wanting to see, like, what they have to say to respond to this, right? The story of where Baldoni admits that, did I always ask for consent? Did I always listen when they said no? What his response was, because it's not dealt with in the complaints themselves. Well, his direct response is to deny the whole thing. It's interesting because there are witnesses, right? She was with her assistant and her driver. So this seems like something that could be very easily disputed with other witness testimony. But if you're looking for what Justin Baldoni's answer to that is, it's that no, that, I guess, didn't happen. But yeah. Kirsty Flaw needs to be subpoenaed. I'm gonna be honest, I don't think she's connected. I genuinely don't. I know everybody's gonna think I'm crazy because of how much content she's put out. I genuinely don't think. I think she's just doing it because she saw an opportunity and is making content on it. I don't think somebody's putting her up to it. So yeah, so he's denying that in front of like that story, even though there's a witness. So that's interesting. 95 to 95. So yeah, they talk about here he's issued similar language to what he said in the car, that he's crossed boundaries in his 20s, and that, you know, you start to think, well, we want, and all the rest of the stuff. He admits, but again, but it's out of context and not in the right, it's not characterized correctly. In talking about discussions that Baldoni and Heath had about that they used to hook up with a prior woman that they had, like, both shared or both had a relationship with, I should say, that really disturbed Lively, how they were describing passing women between them. And also this conversation where they talked about their addiction. They both kind of say, where is it now? 95 and 96. Heath and Baldoni both say no clue what's that's referring. So again, I think that's something that obviously Blake Lively probably found this out from somebody, from a witness, right? Unless they did it in front of her. So it's kind of bold for them to say they don't know, because I would assume there is a third party who does know that conversation if it's not Blake Lively. When it comes to talking about her deceased father, again, he just basically says he has no clue. Don't know anything about that. Defendant lacks sufficient knowledge to know her state of mind. Oh, and then denies everything else. Sorry. So yes, he's denying the conversation. Interesting. Again, if there's witnesses to that conversation or somebody else knows, then obviously that could be a problem. But if it's just between him and Blake Lively, then that's going to be difficult, because it'll be his word versus hers. I'm so... I don't know what we're saying. Looking at chat right now. She's got 3 different stories about why she released the bump video. Yeah, I mean, she does. Her story's changed, but again, I don't necessarily think it was anything other than opportunism. And then, reformatting her whole account to it. All right. 96, 97, we did 100 in terms of calling her sexy. He denies that he did it out of character. He says he just denies referring to her as sexy out of character. So it's not necessarily a denial of saying it, but again, he's just claiming the context is different to what Blake Lively had said. When it comes to, again, this other person making claims, right? Blake Lively has said here that on May 29th, another cast member lodged a complaint about him. He, again, everybody, I think, at this point, denies that. 102. Defendant denies, and denies. So this is all of this. He just says, nope. This is when, the costume problems, and this is the meeting in the trailer with Heath. Deny, flatly. So they don't even admit to the pieces that they admit to in their own timeline. So there. 107. I don't have that one down here. What is that? Oh yeah, and so the 102, the denial here of that another cast member lodged a sexual harassment complaint. We do know that, like you said, on June 1st, he accepted. Oh, sorry, it's not in here. It's in the earlier up here, but in the early thing, he admitted to apologizing to that cast member on June the 1st. So it's strange again that they're denying that there were multiple cast members who complained, that there were complaints made, but he admits to apologizing to that cast member. So I'm not sure what the context is, and I guess that's what they'll get into when they get to depositions to try and find out what exactly he's talking about here. 107, I don't remember this one, so let me go look. Oh, the trainer. Yes. Okay. So in terms of the trainer, talking about her weight and saying that he referred to the trainer as a spy and sought to plant stories to portray his concerns as being motivated by his lower back instead. He denies that. But in terms of the next piece where they talk about the trainer had to update his Instagram message and talked about how there have been negative comments on his post and said to his wife or his children that he explained that Justin Baldoni is not a client. He created a complimentary program for him, and that after an uncomfortable conversation, communication ended between them. He has no clue. He doesn't know anything about that. Nobody does. Apparently nobody's been on Instagram or seen that picture. Everybody says, I don't know. I just thought that was amusing. Which is a shame, because if he missed that, then he also missed Don Saladino calling him out for his nice pool reference as well. The worst part is you don't have to pay influencers to do this stuff. Yeah, I mean, this is the bigger problem, right? And I think this speaks to, basically our media literacy, the dialogue, the political conversations that we have. The vast majority of creators across all platforms who are talking about this content and are doing so being pro Baldoni and negative to Blake Lively are right-wing creators. Right-wing creators who've had a history of either publicly or privately pushing back against Me Too. And I don't think that's a coincidence. And I don't think it's something that's talked enough about. I know that a couple of journalists have called this out and written articles about it, and when they've done, they've pushed back and lit up for it. And I'm not saying there's anything in particularly wrong with that, but it should be painfully aware that a lot of this pushback against Blake Lively is not motivated by Justin Baldoni, Justin Baldoni's fans, people who are allies or interested in male allyship. It is almost entirely motivated by people who have a chip on their shoulder against the Me Too movement and against women being able to, or any victims really, of sexual harassment or sexual assault being able to speak freely and name their accusers and the abuse they've suffered. And I think that is incredibly tragic that there is so much pushback for just what should be something we all support. But anyway, is what it does. 127 coming through. So a lot of the conversation here that Lively includes in her extended complaint about talking to Angie Giannetti, they don't really know about, which is understandable. They don't know that private conversation and what happened between them. So it doesn't surprise me that they say that they don't know. Okay, after unsuccessfully attempting raising concerns with Sony, Lively expressly told Baldoni and Heath that there were serious HR problems on set. They responded that they knew, implying that someone had mentioned to them that Lively had raised concerns. In response, Heath told Miss Lively that she thought she'd wanted to see the video of his wife. I think this is a really interesting call out here, right? So we're talking about this is on the next day of June the 1st. So I don't think that at the time Lively knew that Giannetti had talked to Wayfarer. And I think this is a large part of what the trickery almost, or the kind of technically correct and accurate business that Wayfarer are doing, in that technically Blake Lively didn't tell them anything. Angie Giannetti did on Blake Lively's behalf about the concerns that Blake Lively had. So when you're saying here that someone had mentioned to them that Lively had raised concerns, they're saying they knew about them, but they came from Angie Giannetti. They didn't come from Blake Lively, which is how they then get to then in all of their answers say, oh, Blake Lively never said this, or we didn't know about this from Blake Lively, or all of this because they knew about it from Angie Giannetti. I could be wrong. They could be applying their denials more generally than that, but I think that is a very dangerous answer if that is what they are actually doing in terms of saying, oh, we didn't know about any complaints. Anyway, in terms of 127, yeah, they all deny it. Deny that they had this conversation with her or that they were aware of complaints. Again, anytime the HR complaint, HR problem, HR concern is mentioned, it's an immediate denial. They don't recognize that the conversation happened and it's out of context. They don't, any of it. It is immediately denied every single time. Baldoni talking here about hearing the grievances of Lively and told another actor, dude, I have to tell you something, but I don't want to cancel or lose my job. They don't know anything about that, which again, if this is coming from a third party witness who knows about it, I guess they're going to try and say that that person is lying. I don't know. Interesting. Again, talking about Lively and others' attempts to raise concerns during conduct during filming. It's discussed in the incidents above, which they even mention in their own timeline. Even that gets a complete denial. And again, like, it should just be recognizing the events that they themselves described in their own timeline, and it's not. Okay, 134. What we got? Yeah, this upsets me a lot, especially women creators should know better. Yeah, 100%. Is it just me, or does deny the context give? Yes. I mean, I've talked about this before about abusive personalities. They will often say, oh, everything that's being said about me is out of context, and I don't, and and they're lying and they're not telling you the truth. Great, cool, show me the context. And it comes back to 600 pages of legal filings. What's the context? You don't have any. I have definitely been in the situation where people have said, you've said X, or you've done Y, even like as a content creator. And it's very easy for me to just show the receipts, right? This is how I got a reputation for being the person with the receipts. I struggle to understand how in this case you can't show the receipts if you're going to deny the context. But anyway. Baldoni is everything conservative content creators are against, and it's definitely just a backlash against women and Me Too. Yeah, 100% Obi Mom Kenobi. I mean, like, that's 100%. Yes. And you can see it whenever you go back and forth with them, eventually they slip, and all of that misogyny just comes pouring out. Pouring out. All right, where were we at? 134. Okay. Yeah, so 148. So again, talking about the receipt of the November 11th protections, that the counsel, the legal counsel for Wayfarer, announced that, they said, hey, although our perspective differs in many opinions, we found most of them reasonable, but essential for the benefit of party involved. This is an acknowledgement that Wayfarer themselves have reproduced in their complaint. I believe it's also in their timeline. They accept, right? They've shown us this message. So yes, they did do this, right? There's no question. However, 148 is, again, we admit the text, but defendant denies all of the remaining allegations and denies that the communication and its context are accurately portrayed. There is nothing in here other than they sent that. I don't know what the context is. How is this out of context? There's no context. I don't know. It's strange. 153. I don't think that we will need to go through some of this stuff. They do admit that all hands meeting happened. 153. They admit that all hands meeting happened on January 4th. So they admit this, but they disagree that any of the 20 behaviors were discussed. That, you know, Lively had shown earlier. They deny this allegation, that they did not deny the veracity of her examples, and they also deny this one, that the behaviors would also take place. You can see here 333, like deny. So they're saying the meeting happened and that the people present were there. They are denying everything that was said in that meeting. Again, this is a meeting where they admit that is with Baldoni, Heath, Alex Sachs, Todd Black, Angie Giannetti, Ryan Reynolds, and Miss Lively. So Baldoni and Heath are both saying, no, that was not what happened. You have 1, 2, 3, 4 witnesses other than Blake Lively who can allege to what happened in that meeting. So we won't know until those witnesses and the trial, but yeah, it's a bold move for them to say, yeah, we don't think any of that happened. Now, it could be that Blake Lively is misrepresenting it. I don't think so, but that's their plan. That's what they're going with. 150A is where, you know, Blake Lively talks about the professional set that they had when she's talking to one of the other cast members, saying, hey, you know, we've got these fixed. It's going to be a professional set going forward for the second part of our production, was because she tried to privately resolve these concerns of harassment and all the rest of the stuff. And then, you know, they launched this retaliation campaign. Their answer is they don't know. I thought I would see a denial here, but every single one of them says, I don't know. And I think they just say they don't know anything about her state of her mind, but we deny everything else. So strange is what it is. They deny that Sony gave her the cut of the film, 162. Coming in here, the Sony cut of the theaters, which was led by Sony, with Sony and Colleen Hoover. They deny flatly across the board, which is interesting because there were rumors, and that was the Daily Mail article that came out on the 9th. I think it's the 9th or the 8th, that they tried to suppress, the one that came out with James Vituska, that talked about, you know, Baldoni's abusive and chauvinistic behavior, talked about how Colleen Hoover was brought back in to help with the rest of the movie. So they're denying that again. What's the logic behind giving up their texts and emails? It just seems silly. Yeah, I don't know. The only thing I don't understand about this whole thing is why it has to be one side or the other. Why can't it be both of them are horrible, toxic people? Icarus has found you. Because, and it's a good question. I know we're going to kind of keep moving because we're already almost at 2 hours now and we got a little bit more to go. The reason Icarus is why it can't be that, or why that is problematic, is because it is a way to absolve yourself of any responsibility or of going in and kind of verifying the facts. If you kind of just sit this from the outside and say, both people are terrible, I don't need to do anything else, whatever, who cares about this? All that does is support the person who's being abusive. It is a mindset that is done a lot of times in politics in order to help push the discussion further towards extremism, because it acknowledges that both sides are as bad as each other, even when objectively and looking at it from like actually evaluating what is going on, both sides are not equal. But by dismissing them as, you know, there's good people on both sides, you help to continue to shift the conversation towards extremism, which is why it's always important, especially in cases like this, when you don't know, you're not sure, to actually do the research. Now, it's totally fine if you're like, hey, this is gossip, celebrity. I don't necessarily, you know, there are more important things I could care about. There are community programs I can go help with. There's mutual aid stuff that I can go do that is more useful than watching a 2-hour video on Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni. I totally understand that. But I do think dismissing some of these arguments, especially in cases like this, as both sides are as bad as each other, is not helpful. And it's actually a tool that actually moves the conversation more towards extremism. Anyway, yeah, justifies the misbehavior. Yup. All right, 162. And I think also it dismisses the behaviors, right? And I think you should, if you want to say, oh, Blake Lively or Ryan Reynolds did something bad and I want to address that, address it on its own. Like, go in and deal with it, and then also address Baldoni's behavior. What happens is you have this conversation where you say, hey, Baldoni did this terrible behavior, and everyone goes, well, what about Ryan? Well, what about, like, it's a way to deflect and not actually have a productive, meaningful conversation about how we change behaviors and make people more safe in future. Okay, I'm off my soapbox. For a moment. All right. 170. What did I call this one out for? The marketing plan. They kind of admitted that the marketing plan did come from Sony, and then they have really weird wording here in that they just kind of admit that yes, this is what's in the marketing plan, and then for this one, they say that Wayfarer had embraced on information and belief and formally approved of the marketing plan. They deny. And I just thought that was strange again, that like they admit that the marketing plan exists, they admit the text in it, they admit, as you'll see here, the wording of the marketing plan, and that Baldoni did participate in, the activities of the marketing plan, such as, appearing at the floral themed, all the rest of the stuff, that they made social media posts around it and stuff, admits all of it, but then denies that they accepted or approved the plan. So I don't know what that means. Are they just talking about like some sort of formal approval? I don't know. No. Yeah, they came up with the pop-up shows. And that's the thing we talked about in the marketing plan, which I forget which one that is. Episode 4, where we talked about the marketing plan. The marketing plan is based on the original Wayfarer plan they put together long before production, long before they ever filmed anything. 178. Okay. So this is where we start to get into Baldoni pivoting onto domestic violence. Again, this is where they admit to all of the text messages in here. So talking about, hey, I want to post only about domestic violence. It won't feel performative now you've done substantial press on it. Admit that the context isn't wrong. Theater surprise, right? I forgot. Let me see. Interviews. I think it's in here, right? 811. We talked about this on episode 5. Oh my gosh. 8.2, 8.7, 8.11. Yeah, there we go. Theater surprise. I didn't connect this, right? We talked about on August 11th, Baldoni was in Sweden and surprised a local cinema and did like a pop-up there and talked about the movie It's All About Hope, quoting the marketing plan again. I didn't connect originally where she says theater surprise. That's what they're talking about. They're talking about the surprise he does at the Swedish theater. And then I think Survivor content testimony. So they're talking about posting the content from the theater surprise and then pivoting to do Survivor content. Again, admit. Yep, did send this. This is accurate. The context is wrong. Also him talking about this. Where was the birth piece? Yes, 182. He went so far as to proposing to share a video of a woman's birth moment, but the team talked him out of it, warning that it might be perceived as weird and still too intimate. Right? Weird thing, especially like given the whole already birth video that him and Heath desperately wanted to show Blake Lively the day after at lunch, that was not in conjunction with the birth scene she was filming. Him wanting to share a video of somebody else's birth moment. Very strange. But again, 182. Let's just go directly to Baldoni's answers here. 182 admits the allegation that Abel and Defendant sent communications text in that paragraph, but he denies the allegations in it. So he admits to wanting to share a video of a birth moment, and that Abel told him it would be perceived as weird, and they had to talk him out of it. this is like, I don't know why he's admitting this stuff. This is strange, and not a great look at all. So coming back to, talking about they want to bury her, they sent their materials back to them in November 23 and even referred to her complaints internally. Again, any acknowledgement that there were complaints or that they knew about them, deny, 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 even though they're all throughout their timeline. 184. This is where, Abel reacts to that story talking about E-News depicting a kiss in the set of the film, and Abel said, somebody else says it's cringy. Blake was probably grossed out too, or she says it's cringy. The other colleague says Blake was grossed out too. Abel responds, yeah, and filed a cease and desist. Abel admits to it. And listen, Nathan, they admit that that text message is legit, but out of context. Again, what the context is, we don't know. Baldoni saying that, he needed a plan in May 2024 that, plans make him feel at ease, admits. 86, talking about we should have a plan if Blake Lively unfollows him when the movie comes out. Again, worth noting, the plan was not conceived in response to any particular allegation. It was entirely about managing public perception, that he feared basically the theoretical possibility that Lively might decide to unfollow his social media accounts. This whole idea that Wayfarer did all of this, hired Nathan, came up with the plan, we're doing this because they feared or because there were stories being planted. Nonsense. Again, 186, admits. So they admit to planning and wanting a plan when Blake Lively, when they learned that Ryan Reynolds had unfollowed him. What I didn't spot, and despite the fact I've read this thing a multi times, it says here, in fact, Blake Lively and her husband unfollowed Baldoni 10 months prior. So they hadn't just unfollowed him in May. They must have unfollowed him in what, like August, September of the prior year. So she unfollowed him at some point between breaking for the strike, getting the dailies, and then when the November protections comes out, which, going back to what we talked about before, it definitely feels then like there was something that happened regarding the dailies, right? Because this was an unfollowing. If it's 10 months prior, May is 5 months. 5 months back is what? July? July? So it's after they shut down. Let me go look, because I'm sure, isn't it like June 25th? No, June 24th, like that. That's when they shut down for the strike. I think June 15th is when the actual email goes out. Yeah, June 14th, and then the June 15th email. So Blake Lively ends production on June 15th. They unfollow him somewhere in July-ish. So also good on him for noticing 10 months later. So yeah, it again reinforces this idea that their story doesn't add up of they were doing it because of retaliation for Blake Lively and her Leslie Sloan planting stories. They were planning this long before, and they planned it, and they admit they were sending these text messages back in May of 2024 before all of this. All right, 189. This is where he talks about, hey, we should probably, have a defensive move with my neurodivergence. Everything I've been accused of is social awkwardness and impulsive speech. 188 admits the text of that one, so he definitely did send that. Again, it's out of context. The same day, Abel reviewed the agreed upon protections from the contract for the basis for the contract writer. Now, we've seen the text messages where she talks about doing it July 24th, right before they hire Nathan. Everybody says they don't know about that, her doing it over here in June, but Abel confirms that yes, she did. And it makes me interested to know how they knew that she agreed upon, reviewed the agreed upon list of protections. Was there something on that DocuSign document that you can see when and who views it or accesses it? Because I wonder if that's what tripped them up here, and how they know about this is that there's a flag on there that, oh, somebody's looking at the document and opened it on that day. But anyway, they also do admit to, yes, they reviewed them on July 24th, right before they hired Nathan. Okay, 190. 192. That they discussed a proposal to get ahead of any potential publicity regarding HR's complaints against him with a social and digital media combat plan. What's that one? 192. Now, remember what I said. They deny anything as soon as there's HR in here. HR, denied. Even though it's using the language we know that they say elsewhere, Nathan says no, Abel says denied. No, no, don't know anything about that. We did not do that. We didn't discuss this. Now, we haven't seen the text messages for this particular text message on July 29th, but I suspect they have them given that they are saying them. I kind of wonder if maybe she just talked to her at a junk farm, and that when Isabel does 180 and so does Blake because they compared notes. I don't know. It could also be that, of them talking about the fact that Isabel Ferrer was shooting late June, all the way up to like the 24th, 25th when they actually shut down production again, which I think is, what is it, like June here? I don't know. But when they shut down production again, their final day of shooting phase 1, so June 27th. So it could be something to do with that. As if he wasn't infuriating enough, we now get to the point where he tries to weaponize neurodefinition for all scientists. And this is the thing is like, he very clearly shows how he's talking about wanting to use survivor content, wanting to use narratives, anything but just admit fault. And I think this is the thing with them talking about giving the the public apology, August the 12th. Wayfarer could have also issued that, and none of this would have happened as well. All right, so 2 and 2. Now, 202. Now we're getting to the good stuff, okay? So I talked to you before. They have no idea, remember, who Jed Wallace is. Also, the whole text message here where they talk about wanting to talk to the journalist who works with the other stories and they can do the green light and go after Blake because, she's terrible and ready to go. What's this one, 200? Yeah, they admit that one as well. But like, I don't know, armed and ready to take the story of Blake, rape-enabling feminists, will do anything for us. Like, they're actively talking about planting negative stories, and yep, that's accurate. But anyway, so on August the 2nd, Nathan, Baldoni, Abel, and others have a call to discuss Nathan and the services that TAG would provide for Wayfarer. Yep, they admit, actually happened. Okay, the scenario planning document that we talked about as Exhibit D, they admit to that. It specifically states that it was because of Blake Lively making her grievances public. Admit. They basically go through all of this and admit to all of it. That they wanted to talk about her less favorable reputation, planning stories about weaponization of feminism. Baldoni said he wasn't in love with it. Heath responded that this is the most important thing of how they can shut it down. All of it. Yes, this is all true, but we don't know the context. Okay. Then talking about we can't write it down to him. If it ends up in the wrong hands, he's going to bury. He wants it to be buried. We can't write it down to him. It's this one, 209. Again, Baldoni saying he doesn't know anything about this conversation, but Abel and Nathan admit all the way through. But yeah, so the big part about this is Heath responding that, the great thing about this is how quickly they can shut things down and place stories in your favor. So they do admit that was what he said. And, it kind of, again, leans into the fact that they were intending to place stories. They weren't just trying to be monitoring social media and see what was going on. They were actually trying to influence and plant stories to his benefit. Okay. 217. Nathan coming in with her, 2 quotes and talking about what she's going to do and have full social crisis team, all of this stuff. 214, also, admit. Social combat plan that they needed to have and put in place. I mean, we've seen his text messages from this, so we know that this is legit because he gave us the full context of those text messages. Admit. Okay. 216. On information and belief, TAG engaged Jed Wallace to implement their social combat plan. They openly deny. Now, I assume they're denying because they didn't engage him to do a social media combat plan. They were just engaging him to do monitoring, and that's what they're talking about here. But remember, they talked about before, no idea who Jed Wallace is. Every question that we're, talked about what he does and whatever does, don't know, never heard of Jed Wallace, don't know. Everybody has complete amnesia when it comes to Jed Wallace. Okay, so now we get into the section about Jed Wallace. So Jed Wallace is a consultant who describes himself as a hired gun. Nobody has any idea about that. That he specializes in executing confidential and untraceable campaigns. Nope, nobody has any idea about that. That he's got, no online presence. He's the guy who makes things untraceable. Nope, no idea about that. Okay, he runs and is the owner of Street Relations, and they do crisis mitigation and helps navigate clients through scary scenarios. Nope, no idea. Don't know what company he owns. Don't know anything. Yes, Jed is just a hologram. Correct, Vander V. Good to see you, by the way. We have no clue who he is. He is Kaiser Soze. Okay. That Jed Wallace and Brian Friedman have a close relationship. That Melissa Nathan sent to Jennifer Abel a text message saying, can I start a signal thread with you, me, and Jed, just in case you need him to connect you to Brian because they're very close. 221. Nobody has any idea about that text message. Even the two people who are named on that text message, Melissa Nathan and Jennifer Abel, don't know nothing. Every other place where there's a text message where they're named in, they admit to, other than this, is it this next one? Is it 222? Oh no, it's the HR text message. The HR text message they deny as well. They deny that one though. This one, they have no idea. They're named on it. They don't admit the text is correct, but the context is weird. No. They have no idea about this text message that they sent. Very strange. Busted. Yeah. There is. I cannot believe that Sarah Nathan hasn't been fired. Seems to me she's stealing from her employer. She's not reporting. She's part of an extortion racket. You think Page Takes would take issue? So I think Junk Farm, the reason why is because I think Nathan was not as influenced by Melissa as we think. I think that's the reason why Melissa panics on August 8th that Sarah has to run her story as a result of all of the fallout of everybody talking together. I'm going to go back to this. At this point, I know everything runs up. Where she's panicking and saying that, Sarah has to run her story. And I think here she's now pushed somebody to write more, I think is Sarah as well. I don't think Melissa had full control over Sarah, editorial control over her, or what she was going to write. I think the way that Melissa Nathan was doing it was by using the tip lines, using anonymous tips to plant stories that journalists would then reach out to Nathan or Abel to get information on background, and then they could then shape those stories without having planted them, but do so off the record. Again, knowing nothing about PR, that's how I think this went down. I don't necessarily think, hey, this is what we're doing. That said, however, when we get to 272 with Sarah Nathan, there's some weirdness there too. Because of course, right? 222. Tag and Nathan have a relationship with Wallace that precede this litigation. Tag confirmed its answer in the first complaint that Lively filed in the court that Nathan had worked with Wallace on previous matters and Tag retained him to work on behalf of the defendant. We talked about this last week. Every single person has come back and said, oh yeah, I know that we did respond and give an answer earlier that said Tag erroneously stated in its answer to Lively's initial complaint that Tag had retained Wallace. Now we're denying everything. Now we're saying Tag didn't hire him. We don't know who he is. We've never heard of him. Where things get weird is when we get to 224. When we're talking about, okay, we're going to enable the social media combat plan, right? We talked about this as part of, I think, the first part. They admit to the text of that one. The next email, where Jamie Heath is being sent a message from Jennifer Abel saying, hey, like, what are we doing about the pricing? How much does the social media manipulation, proactive fan posting to counter the narrative cost? Right? So they're deliberately calling out here, we want social media manipulation, we want mitigation, we want proactive fan posting. Is this 15K on top of what we already spent? Is it 30 grand or is there more? What about the separate team based in Hawaii? Blah, blah, blah. Jamie Heath is on this email. Melissa Nathan's on this email from Jennifer Abel, right? Abel and Nathan both admit the text message. I just want to make sure we get this right. 225, right? 225. Nathan and Abel both admit the text. Jamie Heath says, I don't know anything about this email. You're on the email. You're on it. How do you not know about it? The other two people on the email know about it, but not Jamie Heath. Okay, the next day, the email where Jennifer then sends to Jed Wallace, the man they know nothing about, did not engage, don't know him, who? The email that Jennifer says to Jed Wallace saying, hey, Tag, can you get him up to speed and get him enabled on it? 226. Melissa Nathan and Jennifer Abel say, yep, that email's correct. That's the text of it, but it's out of context. What? But you don't know Jed Wallace. You didn't engage Jed Wallace. 226. They admit it. This is where it gets really weird. Every time there's a text message that talks about Jed Wallace, where they talk about feeding this post to Jed Wallace or the response from Jed Wallace, they admit to. So they admit to all of the text messages where Jed is included, Jed is named, except for the one where they talk about connecting him with Brian Friedman and starting up a Signal thread. That one they don't know anything about. And they don't know anything about Jed Wallace personally. It's so strange. And obviously this is going to be something that's going to be very easy for them to rip apart when they start talking to these individuals about their involvement, and especially if there's more text messages and once they get more. So this is where I think things fall apart for Wayfarer. Okay. Yeah, I can't comment for like 12 hours. I think they're spamming YouTube with my username. Oh no. Imagine saying, yes, Abel retained him and Nathan worked with him and then said, oh wait, actually nobody knows him. Yes, Marcy Jinx, like that's what they did. In their original complaint, they said, yes, we've retained him. We've worked with him previously. We know, we're fans of his work. We know what he does. And now they're like, I don't know who Jed is. So for example, 228 here, talking about how we flagged this to Jed and the team as well. They say, yeah, we admit the text of that one. How does any of this make any sense? And I struggle with this, right? Because it's not surprising to me that everybody's moved off talking about the case right now and their answers, because this is a lot of work, right? Putting that spreadsheet together is a lot of work. We're too busy talking about Deadpool and Wolverine and, making children say profanity, right? But how does anybody who really believes that Wayfarer are telling the truth here square this at all? That they are admitting to hiring Jed, that they say, yes, we've worked with him before. Now they come back and say, we've never heard of him. Yes, there's all these text messages that mention Jed, and all of those text messages that mention Jed are correct. This email that mentions Jed is correct, but only 2 of the 3 people say that it's correct. Jamie Heath, for instance, says, I have no clue about this email. How does that work? Like, do you not see that, like, somebody's not being truthful here? Like, they also admit to, this where they talked about, where are we, 220, 230. Nathan Abel, Wallace, Street Relations, and others engaged by Tag perpetrated a retaliation scheme against Lively and social media. They obviously all completely denied that one. When media stories made direct inquiries regarding potential unflattering stories about Baldoni, Nathan, Abel, and their teams worked to suppress those stories. Nathan and Abel both say, we admit to responding to media inquiries. We don't necessarily suppress stories, but we did respond to media inquiries. So 224 or 244. Any questions so far? We got chat. Post-truth something or other. Yeah, I mean, facts don't matter anymore. And I think it just shows, right, like how when you actually start digging in, and this is the whole point of doing these streams, is to go deeper into these documents. Once you start digging in, they admit to it all. They're just constantly saying, well, it's context. Well, provide the context. Show us what that is. When talking about like that Baldoni would not be cancelled, they deny. But then Steve Sarowitz comes back and says, well, actually, yes, Baldoni did have a conversation to discuss services that Tag and Nathan might do, but that's it. So his answer was slightly different. Everybody else just offered blanket denial for that one. 252, I think these are more Jed texts. So this is where things get weird, right? So I'm just going to go quickly through these. 252, it's another Jed text. 252, Abel sent TikTok post of Mr. Baldoni and Lively appearing to laugh together and wrote, would be great for the digital team to boost in, oh, wrong one, 252. Help if I could actually count. Jed also shot me a note and asked to schedule a Zoom conversation, 252. 252, yep, text, that's correct. And 256 and 7, 256. This girl's claiming that Baldoni invited to her hotel room. Maybe he's a big fan of Impractical Jokers. The tag team said, let us chat to Jed on this one as well. They admit to that text message as well. 257. Baldoni responded on the same thread about Instagram, talking about it. You know, this is where Melissa Nathan says that Jamie and Jed had connected on this. That text message is legit and accurate as well. So all the way through, every time there's a Jed text message, they are admitting it. And then finally, where is it? We flagged this to Jed and his team for more serious action on the social media side. 260. Let me just show you Baldoni. Oh, Baldoni doesn't know. Baldoni doesn't know. Nathan does. Nathan does. Nathan says, yep, we did send the communications on 260. They're correct in that paragraph, so 260 is correct. So they admit to sending messages to Jed Wallace. They admit to sending him social media posts to manipulate and push, but they don't know what he does or anything about him. Honestly, I wish I could get paid 15 grand a month to look at Reddit. I should have been a Jed Wallace. Well, you see, now's the time. Now's the time. I hear there might be an opening. He might have, might be a gap in the market, a new business that needs to be set up. Okay, so 263. So yeah, 263 I think is the one I was talking about with the HR complaint. I've talked about this last week. This is one of the few text messages that they just outright deny that they sent. Nobody else knows about it. Nathan and Abel are the only ones on the text message, or there's a third party, I guess. They don't know anything about it. They deny it outright because they don't want to acknowledge that they were talking, but there were 3 HR complaints. So it's understandable. All right, we're wrapping up slowly. All right, 272. So this is where I talked about the Sarah Nathan stuff that was weird. Do we have a date? I don't think so. When we come through the Sarah Nathan stuff, I don't remember exactly where it is in here, but Abel and Nathan start talking about the page 6 article that Sarah Nathan's working on. And Melissa can't respond to it. So she talks about, hey, can you go handle it and talk to Sarah? Or do you need me to help? And she says, no, you go for it. And the Blake Lively's amendment here talks about how the language in the article is almost a verbatim copy of the language exchange between Sarah Nathan and Abel via text. Nobody knows anything about that. Abel and Nathan know nothing about it, even though in his timeline they talk about, hey, talk to her and do for her. Then they talk about in her complaint that Tag were publicly sharing that article on social media platforms, including Reddit. This they actively deny. And so it's a very strange claim, because this is one of the few places where Lively actually makes a direct claim that they were doing something, right? Not that they were working through Jed Wallace, the social media team, to do something. She's saying that Tag specifically shared this article. To me, that suggests they knew. They've got some evidence of that. And they're saying here, Absolute Iris, and then link to this comment, this post on FOMO of it. I don't know how they know that that account is linked to Tag, but Tag deny it. Maybe we are all Jed Wallace. Yes, I'm Jed. He's the new Spartacus. Jed Wallace was the friends we made along the way. That's awesome. Hello, God, it's me, Sarah. That's awesome. We need that. We need that. That's merch. That's the logo on merch now. The Jed Wallace was the friends we made along the way. And I think that's really it. There's a little bit here of Sarowitz kind of changing, got a different exchange here. So in they talk about not sharing it. Where's the Sarowitz stuff? 276. So this is the exchange between Nathan Abel and Justin, where he tells them that Sarowitz had told them about flipping the narrative and going after Brian Reynolds, saying that he'd said the script was a disaster and that the female writer didn't know what she was doing, blah, 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 blah. What's really weird about this is if you look at Baldoni, Abel, and Nathan, they all admit the texts, right? They say that, yes, he sent those text messages and he talked about it and that's it. Sarowitz says, I don't know anything about this. And then when it comes to her talking about it again later on 286, is it here? Yeah, at the same time, Baldoni and Mr. Sarowitz were scheming with their PR crisis team to find a way to exploit the moment to flip the narrative, right? Which is the language that we use up here, flipping the narrative, right? So Baldoni, having said, yes, I did send those text messages, Sarowitz, let me just go to Sarowitz's page, and what was it, 286, says, actually, no. Defendant denies that he and Baldoni were scheming to flip the narrative. He doesn't know anything about this, and he's saying that he did not essentially tell anything like that to Baldoni. So that's a place where they're contradicting each other or not sharing the story. Baldoni says, yes, I did send a text message saying that Steve had sent me that. Sarowitz is saying, I never gave him that story. I never told him to flip that, which is strange. The other piece that's strange is 295, and this is where we're kind of really wrapping up now, is, so if you've got any questions before we wrap up, ask them in chat right now, and we'll hand them as we go through. But this is the last bit of weirdness in their answers. This is the part where they talk about that Abel had posted to Facebook, right? Abel posted to a PR and social media group on Meta to defend herself among her peers. While attempting to deny Lively's allegations, Abel conceded the retaliatory nature and intent of the campaign, stating that Wayfarer, Baldoni, and the team had prepared for, that is, conspired to perpetrate a smear campaign, including negative press and social media combat plan, and have further taken steps to go over the top to protect her and put her out there. Let me just see if I do have that handy. I forget if I still got it. I think we talked about it last time, right? Answers, Abel, Sloan answers Q&A. I think I maybe don't have the Facebook pages anymore, I'm afraid. But I thought that was interesting. So the Facebook posts we know about because she put them up there. I, for some reason, do not have them. I don't know what I did with them. Everybody denies it. Everybody says, nope, don't know anything about any of those allegations. Except for Nathan and Abel, who say, yes, she did make that Facebook post. Defendant admits that the social media post was made, containing the text quoted in the paragraph. Defendant denies all remaining allegations. So it's strange, again, that everybody else is kind of issuing this blanket denial, but Nathan and Abel are saying, yes, she did post it. So everything else, though, after this, mostly similar. They just basically deny that they did anything, and then there's a lot of legal conclusions. The only other piece that is a little weird is Lively's allegation on 300, where she talks about basically the everybody here is comfortable with the hate and vitriol that's being put out there, talking about all of the statements that Brian Friedman has issued to the press, you know, calling Lively a liar, that she's saying false lies, that's the allegations against Baldoni are false, blah, blah, blah. And basically she makes the point here that defendants approved and authorized Friedman to publish the above quoted statements as their agent, and Friedman would not have published the statements but for their approval and authorization. Friedman remains the lead attorney for all defendants in this action, and no defendant has issued any retraction or expressly disapproved of any of Friedman's public statements. To make the point that essentially everybody who is being represented by Friedman is, by association, endorsing the statements that he's making to the press. And every single person has given the same response, that they are invoking attorney-client privilege as to the allegations regarding communications between themselves and their attorney. Which, interesting. I don't know necessarily why they would need to invoke that. I mean, you're showing that they do endorse, and by kind of not really issuing any sort of retraction or disapproval of those statements or disavowing those statements, they are accepting them. But yes, they've decided to say that, well, we're not going to disclose what we've said to Friedman because of attorney-client privilege. But anyway, that's it. All right, let's see. Go through chats. Ryan had an opinion about the script called The Cops. Yeah. Do we have any further details about when, where, how Lively got the 150 million quote from Sarowitz? We don't. All we know is that it was at the premiere. So she said it to somebody on the red carpet. I suspect, given that this is where they were also talking about like WME and having the agent there that Ryan was talking to, is it might be somebody there, right? I could see somebody at WME, like Sarowitz, basically talking to them, thinking that they were a safe person to talk to, and coming out. But we don't know where we came from. Again, a lot of this stuff we're probably going to have to wait for the trial to even know about, because it probably will not come out through discovery unless they talk about it in filings that they make. Not a question, but a huge thank you for all the work you're doing on this. It's important and highly appreciated. Thanks, Caspian. I will be doing another one of these this week for the Jones versus Abel lawsuit with the answers from Abel, Wayfarer, and Baldoni. So there's only 3, so that makes that a much faster, hopefully. And there's also only 160 paragraphs instead of 482 or 260. So half the size. Should be a lot faster. But then hopefully with those documents, you can go through, and as you can see, you can hide and unhide the answers themselves. So you can go actually see when it says deny or agree what's actually there. I definitely encourage you to go through and go make your own notes, create a copy of it, go in here, make a copy, and then just go highlight the rows that are interesting to you. If you find anything that I've missed or anything that's cool or you've got questions about, definitely flag it, let me know. We can talk about it. Otherwise, go into the bathroom, turn the lights off, and whisper Jed Wallace 3 times, and he will appear. He will appear and give candy to all the boys and girls, because that's what Jed Wallace does. He does not do any of the things that Blake Lively's alleged. He is a candy gifting sprite, I guess. There we go. I'm just waiting for the day when they turn on each other. Yeah, I think that might be coming sooner rather than later. I think we've talked about this a couple of times. Them all being represented by Friedman is going to continue to be a problem. They're going to need their own legal representation, especially as they start to get into, as we see in these answers, this person told me something, I don't know anything about it, who's telling the truth? They're going to end up being competing against each other, and so it's not going to be in their best interests to continue to be represented by the same lawyer. Brian Friedman talks so much, doesn't even know what attorney-client privilege is anymore. He's been back in the news talking about it, and talking about the dismissals and how it's totally outrageous they're trying to dismiss themselves from the case. And it's like, well, I don't know, put together a better complaint and then you won't get dismissed. Amazing word, thank you. Thanks, Vander V. Thanks, Mossy Chinks. Inspired by Proud Allies and making my own conspiracy theory. Jed is a fake name. We don't know. All right, so like I say, this week, hopefully by the end of next week, we'll have the Jones versus Abel spreadsheet. We can go through this whole thing again with regards to that case. We will probably also see, I would imagine, responses to the motions to dismiss from Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds from Wayfarer this week. I don't necessarily know that we'll get the responses back from Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively as well in the same week, but we should get those this week, I would imagine, hopefully. So we'll see. We'll see if what they have to say in response. So other than that, I think that's it. So have yourselves a great evening. Thanks so much for hanging out with me. Now, this was another kind of long one, 2.5 hours, but appreciate you. Thanks for hanging out with me. As always, if you have any questions, please let me know in the comments. If you have anything else we want to bring up or see that's talk about next week, please do. Otherwise, have yourselves a great rest of your weekend. Appreciate you hanging out with me, chat. Thank you so much. Mo says, thank you, Expatriate, for breaking all this down. Appreciate what you're doing. Keep it up. Always, as long as we're having fun doing this, I think knowledge is power. It's definitely helpful to be educated on these things, especially if you go into the rest of your week having these conversations, so that you can feel equipped and armed to be able to discuss these things. But it's also just fun hanging out with you in chat. So I'm enjoying it. So thanks so much for making this so enjoyable. We'll see you all next week. Appreciate you. Have yourselves a great week. Take care.